give you some differences between depression and grieving. Differences between depression and grieving. When you're depressed, you're usually isolated. It's the me and God doctrine. All I need is my Bible. I don't need no spiritual family. I don't need to go to church. Don't need to go to Bible study. Don't need to reach out to another brother or sister in the Lord. Depression is usually isolated. Grief, here we go, is usually connected. In other words, you're connected to other people. There are people who are stuck in a permanent state of grieving, so to speak, because they're trying to do it by themselves. 1 Peter 4:10, you know the verse, I quote it often. We're all manifold ministers of the grace of God. We're called to be God in flesh. They were comforted by the coming of Titus. One of the reasons why you should be here as often as we have the doors open is because you need to be around people who will encourage you, who will notice you when you're missing. Now, this is not a knock against larger Christian organizations, but some of the communities that you're part of, you cannot be there for 2 or 3 weeks, no one will notice. That's why you need your smaller community so people can check up on you, wonder where you are. You don't like to admit it, but for summer, we all take breaks or perhaps sabbaticals, or we have change in our schedule, and it's nice to feel miss. Yes. When people say, I miss you, where you been? Yes. Good to see you. Yes. Certain communities don't provide that for you, and you need that. That's part of being healthy. So depression is isolated. Grief is connected. Grief is a sad emotion, but depression feels like you're dead. Grief is a sad emotion. Listen to this verse. I talk about this in the ministry of grieving, but in Ecclesiastes 7:2, it says, it's better, here we go, it's better to go into the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Verse 3, sorrow, listen to this, sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. A little bit of a tricky verse, but what the Spirit, I believe the Spirit is saying, the reason why sorrow is better than laughter, or by a sad countenance the heart is made better, is because at least you're starting the grieving process. Whereas some people are laughing and smiling, and inside they're dying. So it sounds oxymoronic, but sometimes the fact, if you have a sad countenance, as long as it's not a prolonged one, because that will lead to deeper levels of depression, despondency, and despair. But a sad countenance feels like I'm allowing myself to embrace and feel the emotion. Jesus was moved with compassion. It says Jesus wept. Paul said, I was a man of fears and tears. Joseph, come on. When he sees his brothers 5 times in the book of Genesis, I believe, or 4 times it says, and Joseph wept. One time he cried so loudly they could hear him in the streets. He's in the palace, but at the enormity of the betrayal of his brothers, at the enormity of not seeing them for 22 years, at the enormity of his journey even, just reflecting, I was my father's favorite son. I had the coat of many colors. Then they sold me into the pit. And then all these people in my journey betrayed me. Mrs. Potiphar betrayed me. The butler forgot about me. Then God, you were gracious to me. He dealt with all those emotions in Genesis 41, 42, through like around Genesis 45. It says he wept. He cried so loudly. You know why? Because it hit him. I remember when my brother died, I've shared this before, at the funeral, out of left field, and I was like my brother's rock, and I was believing for his healing and all sorts of things, and I was a source of strength for me and my family members, and out of left field, I just collapsed at the funeral and just started crying. And I mean, I just hit the ground. which is very uncharacteristic of me, just to collapse. But you know why? I was feeling it. Your bodies aren't designed to not release that. So it says sorrow is better than laughter. A sad consonant sometimes is good for the heart, because when you engage in that, you move out of protest mode. Protest mode is, this isn't fair. This shouldn't have happened to me. Why me? And it transitions to dealing with the loss, and now I must embrace this. One of the best disciplines, that teaching and this, what the Lord, it saved my life, literally. One of the best disciplines is to become a good griever. Yes. It's a discipline. So grief is a sad emotion. And really, to some extent, it's a godly emotion. God is sad and disappointed at the wicked. He's sad and disappointed at people who reject the sacrifice of his son. It doesn't limit him. Here's another difference. Depression withdraws, but grief needs or reaches out. In other words, you can tell a depressed person, and this is very self-incriminating at times for me. You can tell a depressed person because they always are staying in their head trying to figure it out. At times, not always. Don't make global statements, but ask the Holy Spirit to ask you which part of this applies to you. At times, they usually say no thanks all the time. I'm fine. But people who grieve, they're constantly reaching out. They'll say, can we sit down? Can we have a cup of coffee? They come to the meetings. They ask for prayer afterwards. Yes. Sometimes, even if they don't know what to say, they may call a brother or sister in the Lord just to get with them. They may spend the whole dinner and never get to their problem, but they know that this person is a source of encouragement. They're fun. They're lighthearted. And they just know, just by the fellowship, I'll leave better than I went. Depressed people don't do that. If you know people who are depressed and they're going through tough times, one of your biggest curiosities, why don't they reach out? Or where are they? How come you haven't heard from them? Or here's another difference. A grieving person, this is big. Or let me start out with a depressed person. A depressed person usually gets stuck in the past. Some relationship, some job, some season of life. But a grieving person, they don't get stuck in the past. They celebrate the past for what it was. If the past was painful, they've metabolized it, but they're not frozen in yesterday.